Welcome to the Anton Stetner Show. And today we're asking the question, how big is the fraud in Washington State? So Nick Shirley was doing some investigating there in Minnesota. And the talk on the street is there's a lot of this stuff happening all over the country and in certain, places. And we're wondering if it's happening in our own state. And what does that mean for the people that live here? And then ultimately, that was one of my questions. Like, how does it affect housing? How does it affect, rental prices and all that good stuff?
And today we're going back to kind of one of the old school podcast way we used to do this. We're going to go over a couple topics. We're going to go over, basically fraud in Washington is kind of our first two topics. We're going to talk about the Wall Street Journal, then the Washington State tax blitz that we are on. And then we're going to go into President Trump taking to Truth Social and talking about Fannie and Freddie buying $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities and even banning the big bad hedge funds from getting into single-family housing. But before we do all that, Nick Shirley goes out there. He makes this viral video. How many views do you think he has now? And for those of you that don't know, Benji is the OG YouTube ninja, wrote a book on it. Him and his wife have been doing this forever. So how many views do they have right now?
Like his one investigation documentary?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I think.
Do you think they're over a billion, like a half a billion?
Oh, and this is the thing. Across all platforms,
yes,
right? Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, yeah. I think it's definitely half a billion, maybe like 400 to 500 million. But that is also including all the podcasts he's on, all the little clips of him. He became a celebrity and went on every show. It's getting invited everywhere. And what's kind of interesting, he's so young.
Yeah.
When he even talks, he talks like, what do you call it? Gen Z? Yeah, like hella chill about it, not taking away his professionalism because he's done some pretty good stuff, but interesting to see a young person care about government and policy and then where the money's going and then investigating the waste and the fraud. And that's why I'm curious because what's happening here?
So all of a sudden, that causes all of these people to start looking. And as these people start looking, you can't find this in the mainstream media. And you can't even find it on even traditional social media. So the only thing I can find is literally hidden inside of AI searches, hidden inside of X, and hidden inside of TikTok. So I spent time looking through X and TikTok mostly. And I watched some TikToks and read through X. And what I was finding was this one person, she showed a way, and I didn't even know you could do this. You can go to the Washington State's website, fiscal.wa.gov/spending/checkbook. We'll put a copy of this link into the show notes. And you can see over the last 5 months what Washington State has been spending all of the money on. This is like their actual check register. And so then I just went in, I selected the category of grants, benefits, and services. And then I selected children, youth, and families. And then under the recipient, I just typed in home and child. Because I wanted to see if I could just quickly replicate what Nick Shirley was doing. And what I found was there are payments to these home care centers, $85,000, $82,000, $80,000, $80,000, $75,000, $74,000, $72,000, and that's in 1 month. And so I was like, well, I wonder if I can just Google and look up these businesses, quickly look up the business, no ratings. Go to Google Earth, quickly look around. Hey, some of these, they don't look like a true business. You can't see through the windows. You don't see the little child playground stuff there that you would normally see. So immediately I'm like, the fraud's happening here. And so moral of the story is I want you to go take a look. I want you, our subscribers, our listeners, go take a look for yourself. The second thing I started looking at was I was like, well, how much do we just spend in this whole category? So the whole category of grants, benefits, and client services is $14.7 billion. And for perspective, I believe our state spent about $71 billion in 2025. And I'm sitting there looking at it and Malona Health was one of the largest recipients, and you start looking through some of these other recipients. The second thing, once again, I'm looking through TikTok, this person says, why is a bill being introduced by Senator Lisa Wellman? And this is SB 5926. The idea of this bill is to expand the public records exemption for personal information for family home care providers. And I was like, holy cow, why is this happening at a time like this when someone is saying, one of our representatives, that we shouldn't know who daycare providers are? I'm on the complete opposite of this. See, as a real estate broker, I'm in a database. You can go look me up. When we were in the adoption process, we were in a database, the foster care database. You could go look us up. We had to get, all these background checks and put together. And we were even, DSHS comes out to the house and stuff like that. But this senator, through this bill, wants to prevent people from being able to look up who owns the daycare. Things that make you go,
Is she also trying to block you finding out what daycares and facilities get money, or is that still going to be public?
Not in this bill. When I read through the bill real quick, it was just to obscure who owns it. But if you're going to take your little kid somewhere, don't you want to know who owns it? Don't you want to be able to see their reviews?
Yeah, investigate and do your research and make sure your kid's going somewhere safe. But in this case, also just make sure that they're all legit on the up and up, right? Because they're getting our tax dollars in their bank accounts through the state.
So this bill made me go, and just bringing it back around, what I'm seeing, Benji, is with me without doing any major homework, I was like, wait a second, there's things that already make me question this and make me agree with Chris Shirley that there is fraud here in Washington State. Nick Shirley. Yeah, with Nick Shirley, that there's fraud here in Washington State. And that it's probably clearly evident if someone would just do the homework and go figure this out. So I started checking even more to see who had been doing homework. There are 283 licensed childcare providers in Washington State that list Somali as their primary language, despite Somali only being 0.2% of the state's population. In King County alone, there are 349 such registered centers. And so there's a difference between the primary language and them just being a registered center. So this disparity immediately creates a red flag where you go, wait a second, that's a larger number than the percentage of the population. Someone should be investigating
That's just in Washington State?
That's just in Washington State.
And are these all facilities that get money from the state?
Didn't bother. These are just the facilities in general.
Oh, got it.
But this list, and this only goes for 5 months. You can go look at the checkbook for Washington State to see who's getting the money. Now, here's what I'm going to make assumptions about the list. There's probably amazing people on that list who are amazing home care providers, and they should not be dragged through the mud. And there's fraud on there. And there's fraud most likely also outside of the Somali community happening in other ways, because this isn't just daycare, home care. I'm sure it's Medicare, Medicaid. I'm sure it's welfare benefits, multiple recipients. This scam, when you really pay attention to it, it was perpetuated by home healthcare or home daycares where one family would live next to the other family, and they would say, oh, I'm taking care of my sister's kids and I'm claiming welfare benefits, and she'd turn around and essentially do the same thing so they could max out the claims that were happening there.
And then the state was cutting checks to them to help support their business. And there wasn't a lot of maybe filtering or oversight.
Correct.
And auditing happening. And then that just grew from that one party, right?
Yep.
Disregard who they are, background, language, whatever.
Exactly.
Among a lot of different entities. And then that's where you get this fraud that we don't know what the exact percentages. We can make educational guess. Which, are you going to go into that? About how much it could be?
Bingo. That's exactly next. So then I started asking the question, all right, so we got fraud. What are the estimates of government fraud? And the estimates of government fraud, basically, Peter St. Onge made this article, and there will be a link in the show notes. And I'm going to read his opening. Somali daycare powerhouse Quality Leering Center has closed. If you need to leer your kids, you will need a new Somali daycare. Happy for you, you've got thousands of empty ones to choose from. The nation is being seized by what Zero Hedge calls the Nick Shirley effect, as hundreds of citizen journalists fanned out, exposing what looks like tens of billions, perhaps trillions in fraud. And he goes on to talk about how this could be the tip of the iceberg. A new study found in New York City on Medicaid. And let's note that the average income in New York City is $81,000. Is that half of New York City is on Medicaid? Half? Statistically, that's impossible if the average income is $81,000. Okay? Given that 40% of New Yorkers are foreign-born, this would be hundreds of thousands getting free care while the rest of us end up having to pay for it. His words, not mine. I'm just reading what he was saying. He talks about this idea, how this really started to explode during COVID, the COVID fraud boom, and how the fraud industrial complex started growing out of control. And specifically, the Small Business Administration estimated that there were $64 billion in fraudulent PPP loans given out, while other estimates range as high as $80 billion. So you ask yourself, all right, well, what's next? How much do we have at the federal freaking level? Like at the federal level, what's that level of fraud?
How much of fraud? Yeah.
Government estimates, this is the government's own estimate. The government's own estimate is that we have $500 billion a year. That's $500 billion. When Elon was at Doge, he said he thinks it's closer to $1.5 trillion. So let's think about this. Doge got access to all of the records, all of the data, started digging through it, and they came up with this number of 1.5. Do you think the government number of 0.5 trillion or Elon's at 1.5 is closer?
Well, I think that, a betting man might say Elon because he's really digging.
Yes.
Okay. But if you just split the difference, I think that's fair enough too.
Yeah, totally fair enough. Totally fair enough. I'm going to go with Elon because here's the thing about Elon. When you look at his companies, about what he's done with finance, with business, with numbers, he always figures out a way to solve the problem. All right, so if the government has the U.S. budget for the federal government, in 2025, we had $7 billion in spending. If 1.5...
$7 trillion?
Oh, thank you, man. We had $7 trillion. See, these numbers are so big, they're like literally almost unfathomable.
Yeah, $7 trillion just for one fiscal year, right?
$7 trillion for one fiscal year. And we had a deficit of around $2 trillion of that. But wait a second, you just told me 1.5 trillion or 21.4% of it could be waste, fraud, and abuse.
That's Elon's number, right?
That's Elon's number, which means that at the federal level, we would have almost no deficit if we could simply cut out the waste, fraud, and abuse. Then at the state level, you start to ask yourself these questions. And Washington State right now is facing approximately a $2 billion deficit. And the budget for 2026 is going to be about $78 billion. So we don't even have to find the 20%. 20% would be, what is that? 15, 16 billion. We only got to go find like not even 0.5% of fraud, and we wouldn't even have this budget deficit.
Even if you took the number of the state or the federal government, which
Yes.
is a third of Elon's number, that's still half of the problem.
Yeah.
And still major savings, right? Like a dollar saved, the dollar earned. Okay,
That'd be 7%.
Yeah.
So if you take 7% of our 78 billion, just round up, call it 8, 7 times 8, 5.6, let's call it 5. That's $5 billion. We don't have a deficit.
In Washington State.
In Washington State.
$5 billion, yeah. And so what you're saying is potentially there's $5 billion of fraud happening in the United States.
No, in Washington State.
And Yeah, in Washington State.
Yes.
Yes, in Washington State.
We have somewhere between 5 to 14 billion inside of our budget of this waste, fraud, and abuse happening right here in Washington State. And if we just go with the low estimates, call it 5. That 5 takes care of the deficit. Now, this deficit, you have to understand that the legislation, they start their session next week. The legislature, they go into session and they're talking about all the new laws and rules and things that they want to come out. What's the biggest hot button that they're talking about right now?
Taxes.
Taxes. Freaking more taxes. And so we're going to put this up on the screen so you can see this. But I want you to look at state revenue, inflation, and population. And this graph goes back to 2013, so over 10 years ago. And since the 2013 budget, heading into the 25-27, because Washington State runs what's called a biennium budget, which means it's a 2-year budget cycle. You can see that state revenue is up 117%, while inflation is up 47%, and population is up 16%. So in other words, the amount of money the state is taking in is double inflation, and they're telling us that they have a budget shortfall. They clearly in Washington State don't have a budget shortfall. We have a minor fraud problem probably, or even a major one. And we have a massive spending problem. That's really what this is. This is the tax and spend mentality, like just getting out of control. That's double. It's more than double the inflation they are spending. And if you were to ask Washingtonians, hey, over the last 10 years, do you feel like you're getting double the services from the state?
Heck no.
Are we getting double the better roads with less potholes and bridges that are well maintained?
Absolutely not. Traffic's worse, construction's slower, and every single year I feel like we pay way more in taxes.
And that's why this next part, this Wall Street Journal article, like this blew my mind too, that they would literally call our state out for this.
And what is that? What's going on with the Wall Street Journal?
So the Wall Street Journal basically said that Washington State's tax blitz, higher taxes lead to more spending and deficit. So now Democrats are raising taxes again. Now to kind of recap, we have some other videos that go on with this, but basically the Wall Street Journal talked about capital gains tax, 9.9% tax on capital gains over $1 million. This was increased by Democrats despite initial revenue shortfalls. The sales tax exemption was extended to business services, advertising, web design. We ended the exemption on precious metals. Like that's just going to kill, because that started here in 2026. If you read the comments on the video that we did about that, if you look at the comments online, no one's going to buy precious metals in Washington State. They're just going to go to Oregon and Idaho. There is a bill being introduced to hopefully reverse that right now. The estate tax was raised to 35% for estates over $9 million, making it the nation's highest estate tax. The gross receipts tax increased for service businesses and financial institutions. There's a luxury car tax of additional 8%. And Wall Street Journal calls this a tax blitz, increasing taxes on businesses and high earners. And they criticized Washington State because they view this as a threat with rising concerns for capital flight, aka wealthy businesses or wealthy residents leaving, and the negative impacts on small businesses. So what are we doing right now? Are we like, oh, we've raised it 117%? No, Ferguson is out talking about the millionaire tax. And they're trying to say this is just the millionaire tax. Now, when you go and look at how income taxes were introduced at the federal level in 1913, we said income tax will only be for the top 1%. And now we know, Neutrally, you pay income taxes? Oh, that's right. You're still a student. Benji, you pay income taxes?
No, because I'm in Washington State.
No, we're talking federal income tax.
Oh, federal for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we all pay federal income tax at every tax bracket, except for our producer Neutrally, who's still a student.
Yeah. What you're saying is there was a time where that was supposed to be isolated to just a certain tax bracket or to, the rich people. And over the course of 100 years or something like that, now everyone basically pays income tax.
I don't even believe it took 100 years. I actually believe it took 30. Now,
that's crazy.
In Washington State, this will only take, if this passes, till 2031. And every Washingtonian will pay an income tax. So I'm listening to Brandy Cruz, and she had a clip, and this person said to one of the state legislature, or he said, hey, should we believe you in that this income tax is not going to get passed on to everyone? And the guy literally goes, no.
Why should the public, while it's millionaires now, why should we believe Democrats? Why should the public assume that it's not going to be an income tax on them by 2031?
You shouldn't. Not to be flip about it, but if past history is prologue, you probably shouldn't necessarily believe that.
It's pretty clear.
Wait a second.
Oh, he didn't even hide it.
He didn't even hide it. So a member of the current Democrat Party literally says, and we'll play the clip right after this if we can find it and have the producer shove it in, literally says, no, you shouldn't believe that we're not going to pass the income tax on to everyone.
Then let's actually bring it back to the original start of this conversation. This is why Nick Shirley's investigation, and not even targeting a certain community of people, just is exposing a bigger problem that we have. Yeah. And what's crazy is as you're talking, it's like this fraud and this waste and all the money that's going to any establishments that are doing this are what's causing higher taxes.
Absolutely.
Because they're trying to raise taxes, to be fair, to give to the people in one way or the other, right? Like you can disagree with how they spend money or what programs and who gets it, but still, raising of taxes isn't to fill their own personal pocketbooks. It's to pay for things like fixing roads or building a bridge or new programs or a train.
This is where I want to challenge you.
Okay.
Is it? So I love what you just said. And I would like to believe that, but all you have to do is go and look at the Climate Commitment Act and look at all the tax revenue that came in from the Climate Commitment Act. And then if you dig into that data and look at how much has been spent on actually reducing pollution. And I don't have the number in front of me because I didn't expect to talk about this, but it was 70 to 80% of all the money collected for the Climate Commitment Act went to something other than preventing pollution. So Washington State has a massive history of taxing and then us not receiving an equivalent benefit for those taxes. And no one's talking about austerity. So listeners, subscribers, when you guys hit a rough patch or things are slow at work or you get extra bills, you have to tighten your belt. I have to tighten my belt. The government now needs to tighten their belt. Instead, what they're doing is they're saying we're going to raise taxes.
Yeah, we're going to spend more money.
And
we want more of your money.
And then they said the quiet part out loud, and they said, P.S., we're not going to stop at millionaires. Once the Supreme Court says it's okay, we're going to come for everyone.
And what you're just highlighting right now, and this is why the whole Nick Shirley story is significant, is, okay, if you're going to raise taxes, we should at least at the same time lower our expenses.
Bingo.
Okay, because by the way, you lower your expenses, make sure you don't have fraud going on or way less fraud. You might not have to raise your taxes as much or at all. Maybe you get tax savings to the people at that point. And so if you're doing it, it's for me, of course, because you could say the raising of taxes is very much a left-leaning thing. Democrats, progressive because of welfare, austerity or savings, right? Getting rid of fraud was crazy because you think both sides want this. Or lower taxes is very much a conservative thing. Oh, so let's just meet in the middle, right? Hey, you're going to raise some taxes. Let's just cut some savings. tighten our spending, and then on top of it, find out where we're wasting money, and we're all in a better place.
Based on what Nick Shirley has done and what some of the local, citizen journalists have started to uncover, I believe we wouldn't have to even raise taxes if we just simply cut out, not even all of it. We just need to cut out some of the fraud. And we could get that extra few $billion that's necessary right inside of our budget by someone just going and checking. Like, as a business, I've never written a check and been like, just thrown it to the wind and not been like, where's that going? Hey, did that contractor actually install the flooring? Did the lumber company drop the trusses? We go and inspect what we expect because we have to make sure that the dollar is being spent wisely. So what if someone just went and inspected all of it? Just go inspect the dollars. You're going to find this. You don't have to raise taxes.
That's crazy. Like if someone did go aggressive, because and this is kind of where what do you call it when it spreads? Like it
cancer.
Yeah, it's like a cancer that spreads. Like it's an
epidemic.
Of fraud.
Yes.
And that's why we're not trying to target any communities. We're saying like the fraud could be actually even bigger than that.
Oh, it's way bigger than that. That was just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, exactly. And so now, because of COVID, lockdowns, everything was done digitally. I don't even know if the county in Snohomish County, are they still remote working too?
I think most of the municipalities have started to come back.
Okay,
but
good.
Yes.
Finally.
No, and because we deal with a lot of these municipalities, a lot of them are still not 100% back.
So that's just municipalities for permits for building. If you're just looking across the whole government of Washington State, they're not at full capacity. So like, how can they do the auditing? So what you're saying is like, hey, we need to get back to a place where we're being more fiscally responsible. And part
Absolutely.
of that is double checking where the money's going.
You can't have it go up 117% since 2013 and only have inflation be up 47%. That's more than double. So if you look at that more than doubling in the spending, a logical person says, I have to cut somewhere. I have to figure out where the waste is happening, where the fraud is happening, and I have to make some changes. It's not sustainable what's currently happening.
So what's the last thoughts when it comes to Nick Shirley's investigations, Washington State, the fraud, and then, what's this going to do, I guess, to homes and homeowners?
Yeah. I think, kind of in summary, looking at this, Nick Shirley did something amazing for our country. I think he ignited that citizen journalism. He ignited people and gave them permission to go dig through the government and ask questions. Good citizens ask questions and just say, hey, what's happening here? Where is the money going? Why does it look like? I do believe if we were able to cut the fraud out, Washington's not even in a deficit. And then lastly, if we cut the fraud out, we don't even need to raise taxes. And simply a little bit of spending control, and we're getting even further ahead. And we can go back to being the amazing, prosperous Washington State that we've been, that we're just starting to get really off track in the last few years. And I want to really look, next at what the Trump administration, President Trump, has been saying. And we can I'll tie that back in at the end and how it all relates back to housing.
Sweet. All right. So what's kind of the next topic we're going to cover today?
The Fannie Freddie.
Oh, okay. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities. It sounds like a little bit back to 2008, right? Isn't that what they were doing back then?
So Fannie and Freddie, they did buy some mortgage-backed securities. And so let me explain what this is and the mechanics of it. You go get a loan. Your loan is then packaged up into a bunch of loans. Those loans are then chopped up and securities are sold against it that perform. Those securities that perform, they perform and they pay a yield on them. So if there's someone buying a bunch of those securities, it drives down the yield. More demand, less supply. As it drives the yield down, mortgage rates go down. That's what this means to the average person. So Trump is saying, hey, Fannie, hey, Freddie, My representatives, you are directed to go buy mortgage-backed securities. And I'm going to actually read what he said, and then we'll get more into the mechanics of this. Biden ignored the housing market and instead was immersed with high crime, open borders, runaway inflation, the Afghanistan disaster, a military they left in chaos and confusion. Everything was broken. But I, as President Trump of the United States, have already fixed it. Now I'm giving special attention to the housing market because I choose not to sell Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in my first term. A truly great decision, and against the advice of the quote-unquote experts, it is now worth many times that amount, an absolute fortune, and has $200 billion in cash. Because of this, I'm instructing my representatives to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds. This will drive mortgage rates down and monthly payments down and make the cost of owning a home more affordable. It is one of the many steps in restoring affordability, something that the Biden administration absolutely destroyed. We're bringing back the American dream that was destroyed by the last administration. Make America great again.
So Trump, I forgot this happened. He privatized Fannie and Freddie Mac.
No, that was 2008, and that's before Trump. So that was, oh my goodness, who was before Obama? Why am my brain blanking? Bush.
Yeah.
Bush privatized Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
And then that's when all the trouble started.
And they became what was called GSEs.
Yeah.
Well, if we want to go way back into the Wayback Machine, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were actually purchasing a bunch of mortgage-backed securities in the mid-2000s. And they got loaded up with bad debt. And as they got loaded up with bad debt, the housing market was going to completely collapse, but then the economy was going to collapse too at the same time. So the government stepped in because they were quasi-government entities anyway, and they said, hey, Fannie, Freddie, we're pulling you back in right now. We're going to make you what's called a GSE, a government-sponsored entity. We're bringing you into conservatorship. The government's going to run them. We're going to give you capital, and we're going to fix your balance sheet so the whole wheels don't come off, because that was during the Lehman Brothers debacle.
And then that went till when?
They're still there. We never let them out of conservatorship. The government still controls Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, they control them today.
And then where did the $200 billion come? He said, because of me, now there's $200 billion.
So during his first term, his advisors said that you should sell Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and get them out of the government, launch them as an IPO, get them out of the government, and make them, quasi-government entities, but no longer in full control and in conservatorship. He said no. And what he's saying is now they're worth more. Now they got $200 billion in cash. So immediately what I do, just to be really blunt, you can do this too. I just go pull Fannie and Freddie's financials. And I go, I ain't got $200 billion in cash. So number one, they don't have $200 billion in cash. Let's just make that part really clear. Number two, how could they get $200 billion in cash? Well, they can actually just issue more debt.
Yeah, just print more money, right?
These are different parts of the government.
Okay, got it.
But you are correct. They could do it through the issuing.
It's a form of printing money.
A form of printing money. So the Treasury will get involved. And inside of their current setup, each one of them can take about $200 billion onto their books, and they've got the room to do that.
Then my question for you is this good or bad for the...
This makes rates go down.
Okay, so this is good, though.
Oh, yeah.
Even if the numbers might not be as accurate or not be as transparent, you're saying that this $200 billion that you could be...
This was already good this morning. Rates were 5.99 this morning. They dropped 0.2 on the news.
Wow.
Now, I'm sure as of this recording and when you're listening to it, rates probably pop back up because this was early this morning and it just ripped. And like all things in markets, we sell the rumor, we buy the news. And so the market was still really responding to the rumor. The FHFA director, Bill Pulte, confirmed that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would execute, and they currently hold about $247 billion in mortgage-backed securities, and they have capacity to do this. And but a couple other things. People go, well, this is new. Well, no, They became a large buyer during our quantitative easing programs in 2009 to 2014 and again in 2020 and 2022. So this is not unheard of, okay? This has happened before. People start to pontificate immediately like, wait a second, what's happening? This could also be the Trump administration just kind of throwing a little water on the fire to prevent rates from spiking. But the idea here is very clear. The Trump administration is trying to do everything humanly possible to create affordability for housing. Look at all the ideas they've floated. This is another one that they've just floated because they know that the average consumer is feeling super pinched and that housing affordability is one of those main issues. They're going to do everything humanly possible to get those rates low. We've been talking about this before the 2026 midterm elections, and it just makes sense. This may be short-lived though. So let's say it sucks it down a quarter point. That helps for a little bit. I went and looked though before this was announced. So I was actually looking, this was announced yesterday late in the day, 4:25. Earlier in the day, I was like, I wonder if I can get a mortgage under 6 right now. So I was just looking real quick. Yesterday, before these rate drops, all you had to do was pay 1 point, aka 1% of the purchase price, and you could have got a 599 and a 5875 yesterday. So when we get these little drops, realize that causes all of these mortgage and lending institutions to fight with each other, and with a little buy down, you're in the mid 5s. In the mid 5s, this really starts to unlock and change housing.
So if you also add in that the Fed chair is going to change in the next few months, right? Like 3 or 4 months, it could really go down by summertime.
So,
or spring at least.
Trump at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, in 2 weeks is supposed to talk about his housing agenda. So he's going to launch something there. And what I believe the Trump administration is doing is that he's been floating these ideas and he's going to come out with an all-out blitz and they're going to hammer, excuse my language, the ever-living piss out of anything preventing low rates and housing from happening. They're going to do everything humanly possible to get rates lower, to help that consumer, to make it more affordable, which in turn drives housing. They want to see GDP just absolute rip. Howard Lutnick was on the All In podcast, and he was just talking about how he believed in Q1 of this year, we might see a 6 handle on GDP. How are they going to do that? Low rates.
Building.
Yep. Infrastructure, trade imbalance. Okay. So switching the trade imbalance through the tariffs and all of these reduced taxes through the One Big Beautiful Bill. They are attacking this from multiple angles. And what's really interesting, especially on platforms like TikTok, right? They're like, you're so wrong. Rates are never coming down. You're dumb, blah, blah. And people just, they get all their panties in a wad because they're in their emotions, right? But you can see it happening. It literally took one tweet and all of a sudden, or I don't know what you call a true social, a truth? Are they called a truth? Yeah. One truth to get rates into the 6s. They're going to, I believe they're going to make it happen. I believe you're going to see 5.75 to 5.5. Mm-hmm. I don't know how, and you're totally correct. Powell gets replaced. And if you go look at Trueflation, which pulls in faster, more, better economic data than the Federal Reserve. We already beat inflation. It's under 2. So the Fed can cut, and the Fed is still above neutral.
So it's gonna go down. It could go below 5.5, I think.
It could.
Especially if you buy it down.
I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic, but you're absolutely correct. With a buy down, late this year with a buy down, you could get into the upper 4s.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Trump, he's on his populist rampage. It's very interesting. Trump is a populist president. He wants to do what resonates with a large majority of the population. And so the next thing he did is he said, well, you know what? I seek to ban institutional investors from the single-family home market. We're going to prevent the big bad hedge funds from playing in the market. I'm going to read his truth or whatever this is called. For a very long time, buying and owning a home was considered the pinnacle of the American dream. It was the reward for working hard and doing the right thing. But now, because of record high inflation caused by Joe Biden and the Democrats in Congress, that American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially young Americans. And man, we're hearing that. We're really hearing that. First-time home buyers, they feel like it's just out of reach. Back to what he was saying. It is for that reason and much more that I immediately take steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it. People live in homes, not corporations. I will discuss this topic, including further housing and affordability proposal and more at my speech at Davos in 2 weeks. All right. This one right here is where everyone on the internet gets into their emotions, into their feelers, and not into the data and reality. Trump says this, and people are like, yes, that's a good idea. I'm going to pop your bubble. This doesn't make any difference. But let's dig into the data like we always do so you can make this decision for your own. The largest hedge funds or financial institutions are Blackstone, not BlackRock. Okay, Blackstone was Invitation Homes. So it's actually Invitation Homes now. American Homes for Rent, Progress Residential, and First Key Homes. Now, some of these people own over 100,000 single families. I mean, this is not pocket lit. And in some areas in the South, in places like Atlanta, they do control 20% of the market. Okay, I am a capitalist. I'm a libertarian. Get the government out. However, when capitalism goes awry, you've got to nip it in the butt. If someone controls 20% of a single-family market, like one of these hedge funds do in certain places,
not across the board,
that should be prevented. But how much real estate do they actually control? So, of the single-family homes in the United States, and that they own 1,000 properties or more, they only own 1.6% of all the rental properties. Okay, I got to break one more thing down for you. The average person just heard 1.6 in their head. No. That's 1.6% of the rental properties. When you look at the homes in the United States, 65% is owner-occupied, 35% are rentals. So they own 1.6% of the 35% of the rentals. The majority of landlords, and then feel free to ask your questions, is 1 to 5 properties, and that represents 89.6% of the rental properties are 1 to 5. That's the mom and pop landlord. So it is extremely common in the United States. Someone bought their home. They lived in it for a long period of time. They moved out and bought another one, and they kept the first one. They're an accidental landlord. 90% of them. So even if we look at 6 to 10, that's only 3.5. 11 to 20, 2. 21 to 50, 1.5. 51 to 100, 0.8. Now this other category is getting big. The 101 to 1,000, 1.1. But still, max, you're talking about a max of 2.7 if we include 100 properties and above.
Now they're just targeting 1,000 and above, right? So the big ones.
Well, if we include the 100 and above,
yeah,
it would be 2.7 total.
But the ban will be on 1,000 plus.
Well, they don't say what the ban's going to be on.
Oh, they don't even say
it. And I was going to go into that next.
Okay.
Let's go back into history, right? We have already, the U.S. did it was called the End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act, and we've done the Stop Wall Street Landlords Act of 2022. None of them worked. Now, one of them, the End Hedge Fund Control Act, was forcing them to sell their portfolios off over a 10-year period. The Stop Wall Street Landlords Act was aimed at cutting off their tax benefits and then increasing the excise tax for them to sell them. So we've already tried legislation on this. Trump was not clear where the line would start. And I believe that line, to be honest, would probably be somewhere near 1,000 if I had to guess. But 1,000 is only 1.6% of the properties. The big problem that we really have is 7 of 10 mortgages in the United States still carry an interest rate below 5%. That's the lock-in effect. These people can't afford to move. 70% of the homes that have a mortgage on them are below 5%. So until we get rates lower, these people aren't going to move. And the Trump administration knows that. That's why they're going to try to hammer rates and do everything possible to get it lower.
Get them unlocked.
To get them unlocked. So then I started doing a little research, and I was like, is there somewhere where I can find where they did this? The Netherlands did. So the Netherlands, it's called the Rotterdam effect. And there was the study from Rotterdam in the Netherlands where they mandated and implementing banning landlords from owning properties. And you're like, oh, cool. You know what? Prices probably went down of homes. Rent prices probably went down. And there was probably more homes available. Wrong. Here's what happened. It absolutely failed to help the poor and lower income and first-time homebuyers. Instead, what happened in the Netherlands is the nicer neighborhoods started appreciating faster and people moved into them quicker. And home prices shot up in the wealthier neighborhoods as people moved in because they were no longer allowed to rent them. And then because the supply of rentals decreased, the rents increased significantly and pushed out lower income and younger people, which was the policy this was trying to help in effect. It got so bad. You can go to the Netherlands website right now. They've retracted this whole thing, and it literally says, I'm paraphrasing, please come to the Netherlands. We will help you with taxes. Buy a second home here. Would you like to use it as a vacation rental? This was such a disaster that they immediately had to reverse the policy. There's also a university, I didn't write this down, this was just something I read real quick, so I'm going to go through it real quick, who was doing studies that investors specifically and these hedge funds actually end up contributing to the housing supply. So when they do these build-to-rent communities, where they go build a whole neighborhood. Now, I don't like the build-to-rent communities. I want to point that out there. I'm totally fine investing in them. I just don't like them personally. They found that when they built those units, they increased supply. For every 2 units they built, for every 1 unit they built, another half a unit of supply came to the market there locally. So in other words, if you build 2, 1 popped up inside the market. Secondly, a function that investors like me serve. I buy properties that are destroyed, that a first-time homebuyer can't buy. They cannot financially qualify because you have to come in and pay cash. And they're generally so beat up, you could never even buy them with an FHA 203K rehab loan because they need FHA 203K rehab loans only go up to 40K. And I would say our average project, we've got to put 100 plus into them, and we end up paying cash for the property too. We buy these non-financeable ones. We make them financeable, then we bring them back to the market. If we want to fix this problem, Benji, it's very simple, but nobody likes this non-sexy answer. The solution: streamline the permitting process. Incentivize builders to build first-time homebuyer products. That could be tax incentives, that could be loans, whatever it may be. But building a first-time homebuyer home today is not economically viable. And then, of course, in Washington State, our red tape here is so thick that nobody builds starter homes anymore here. And all right, any questions about Wall Street?
Well, so I'm just doing the math here. Even if you ban the 100+ property investment firm, people from real estate, It actually would free up some supply naturally because they're not going to be competitors in the buying market. But guess what? You have literally like 7 to 8% of the market being these other bigger investors that would just fill their place. So it's not necessarily going to help the mom, pa people or even just homeowners necessarily. And that's why you have to start from the ground up.
You have to start from the ground up, but it's an unsexy solution, and it's a slow, long-term solution. 2.7% of all rental properties, remember, rental properties, when we're talking about single families, make up 35%. 2.7% is institutions that own 100 or more. If all of them came to the market today, it wouldn't do anything. The U.S. is 6 million units behind. We have to build more housing. We've got to clear the runway to do this. Instead, in Washington State, what are they talking about? Let's go tax the millionaires. We're in an affordability crisis. The affordability crisis can be fixed by building more homes. We need this at a national level and at a state level.
Let me ask you this, since you are a developer. If you had half the red tape and you had a tax incentive, right, a major one, how many more developments or properties could you do in a year because of that, like, support from the government?
Oh, I would more than double.
More than double, okay?
Yeah.
And you're just one person.
I am what you would call, I'm barely bigger than a small guy. I'm like the low end of the mid builder developer.
Yeah.
Like literally the low.
But you're
low
definitely
end.
no like BlackRock.
No,
Right.
No,
But
no.
what I'm saying is how many of you are around the country? There's enough of them.
Yes.
Between the ones that do like 1 to 5 properties a year and people like you, where that would just help supply a lot more than it is right now.
It would massively increase the supply. So here's a way to do something like that. It doesn't matter if it's a corporation or a small individual. If they're going to build a certain product, give them a tax incentive or give them a loan to do it, and make sure everything is like 1,500 square feet and below. Only starter homes. Don't give it to the bigger homes. I'm not talking 2,000 square feet. We need starter homes. So first-time home buyers can live in a home and not an apartment or not a condo. In summary or in closing today, I believe Washington State, I believe everyone needs to reach out to your congressperson and to your representative and say no new taxes. Second, let's fix this fraud, this waste and abuse. And I encourage our listeners to go look at Washington State's checkbook. And then lastly, it looks like the Trump administration is going to do everything humanly possible to get rates lower. And as rates get lower, remember simple supply and demand. As rates get lower, demand increases. But we've talked about how tight supply is. If rates go lower, prices go up. So if you're thinking about purchasing in 2026, let's talk about that sooner versus later. We've been having amazing discussions with some of our first-time home buyers, amazing discussions with our move-up sellers and our investors who are getting ahead of the game right now. If that's what you're thinking about in 2026, hit us at resg.com. Drop your questions in the comments below. Let us know how we can help you, and let us know what we should be talking about in the next episode. I'm Anton Stetner. Thanks for listening.